Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. I am your host, Lauren, and in today's episode, I have Candace Mckim. She is an intuitive manifestation teacher. Welcome, Candace. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank
Excited.
you for having me. This is exciting. It's going to be powerful.
Yes, 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 yes. So kind of tell the listeners a little bit about, your story. So like where you were before you do all the amazing things that you do now.
Well, we were just talking before we jumped on here, and I feel like my story might be kind of similar to yours, where you kind of were born into it, or you were awake when you were born. And that's been my story. So that I always felt like there was duality, that if there's a male God, there's got to be a female God, there's got to be the duality of it all. Yeah, I'd sleep in the moonlight at night and as a little girl. And then I was guided towards yoga and spirituality, not religion. And so I started meditating at 12 years old. I started became a vegetarian at 16 and went towards yoga because it was a spiritual path that was more normal.
Yeah.
I know some people wouldn't consider that more normal, but I could talk spirituality, right, as a yoga instructor. I have a degree in social work, but then I became a yoga therapist and chakra therapist. And then I spent the last 2 decades marrying together talk therapy with body, mind, spirit into a form of intuitive coaching and then manifestation coaching. So that's it in a nutshell.
Now, and remind me when we get off. I know this is being recorded. But there is an opportunity that I might have for you for chakra teaching.
Oh,
It's an actual thing that I'm in right now that I want to tell you about, but that's okay.
okay.
Well,
Okay.
just remind me when we get off.
Okay.
Okay. So, and you also before we started to record, you said that you were an astrologer. Where did that
Yes,
come and play with everything that you do now?
I don't call myself an astrologer. I did study Western
Okay.
astrology for 2 years and I studied Vedic astrology. So I am certified in it, but it was just always an interest. And
Oh,
so it just was always there, right? It was always
yeah.
part of who I was and,
Yeah. No,
growing up
I
in
was
the
just curious.
70s.
I was just curious because I'm like, oh my goodness, like not that you call yourself astrologer, but to study it, you obviously have some expertise and background in it. So
Yeah, like
you
I always,
actually,
yeah, like it's one of my first questions. Oh, what sign are you? What's your birth information? I throw
okay,
everybody's birth information in and yeah, just checking it out and yeah, my daughter laughs because every time she's dating somebody, I'm like, okay, well, what sign is he?
yes. It's actually very interesting that you say that because when I started dating after my divorce, I
Yeah,
didn't ask them where they lived or whatever. I mean, I did what in
yeah,
the, later down, but I was like, so what is your birth time? I don't know. I was like, well, go ask your mom and then tell me what your mom says when you ask her that. And and there's a couple men that would be like, oh, you have one of those girls. She's going to
yeah,
be a good one. But I was like, no. And same thing with when I hire a coach. I want to know your lineage. I want to know your birth chart. I want to know what your design is
yeah,
because I've been through that road of not knowing that, not
yeah.
being compatible. And it's more of a plutonic. Do you want to learn lessons or do you want to actually learn what you need to learn? And I didn't even know that until I didn't even know I actually did that until um, I had somebody on the podcast that was talking about that, and she's like, "I do that," and I was like, "Oh, you do that too?" So like, we all do that, like that's a thing. And she's like, "Most of us do," and I was like, "Oh, okay." So that's not like abnormal to actually. So if a listener is listening to this, why I'm talking about this, I don't know, but obviously needs to be said.
Yeah.
Actually, if you are not compatible with your coach, mentor, even your therapist, I feel like, or partner, go look at their birth chart and figure out why.
Yeah. And you know what it does is it gives you a deeper understanding of why they're doing what they're doing and an appreciation for it. So if that thing is bugging you about your partner or your child or your somebody you're collaborating with, once you get that information, it's like an understanding, and then you can come at it with a little bit more compassion, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's why they do that. Okay, now I get it. And that makes sense to me. And I can appreciate that part of them. and we can
Right.
even talk about it. Like I was collaborating with a Pisces, and she is like, she needs to check out regularly, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's, and there was three of us, and the other one was like, what happened to her? And I'm like, oh no, she's a Pisces. She's got to do that. She's got to check out for a bit. But it's like that permission slip for them to be them. Hmm.
I was gonna say I always thought it was my Aquariusness because people are like, "Where'd Lauren go?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm here. I'm alive. I just need to not talk to people." But also that
Yeah.
also is with my for being a projector too. I feel like that
Mhm.
being a
Yeah.
projector, it's like if I'm around too many humans, I'm picking up all their energy and I'm trying to, just sometimes live
Yeah.
sometimes. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish people understood that I do have to check out. It's,
Yeah.
I'm a Pisces moon and rising, so I'm pretty much like a Pisces, but
Well, and being a
I like
psychic and an empath, we all need,
that.
like, we need to nourish. We're picking up so much energies from other people all the time.
Yes.
And so it's that really important to heal ourselves and to nurture ourselves when to release it, right? Not to the point where you don't do anything fun or you don't fly in a plane or that,
Right. Yeah.
I do know people that have gotten to that place, but
Yes.
it is that I think it is really important to recognize that, yeah, no, I'm an empath. I mean, and sometimes I pick up so much energy, but I love going to Vegas. But it's like, okay, I know I'm going to Vegas for 3 days. I mean, I haven't gone for a long time, but if I'm
Yeah.
going, it's like, oh, there's going to be so much energy there. And yeah, let's go do this. It's going to be fun playing that energy, or go to New York and walk the streets and it's at Christmas or so. It's like, oh, I'm going to go play in that energy. And then it's like, whoo, afterwards, it's like, okay, you know.
Right.
Okay,
I
that
need
was good for me, but now
break.
I need to go home.
Yeah. I need a drink. I need a cigarette. I need all that.
Yeah, exactly.
That is it. I've never actually been to Vegas. New York, I love, and I've actually never been at. Have I been at Christmas? I think maybe I've been at Christmas time, but it's very magical. I love
Yeah,
it. I don't
yeah,
like being around that energy all the time, but it's definitely nice for a couple days, to be
yeah.
around all those people. I could people watch. I said to Joey, I said, when I'm older, I'm going to either come to the courthouse and listen to all these court cases about all people, or I'm going to just go to the mall for hours and just listen and watch people because I think people are very interesting.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
like,
and I used to do that
this
as a
is
little
on
girl
TV.
with my mom, is go to the mall. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I used to do
do that.
as a little girl, is go to the mall and sit, and my mom and I would sit and people watch, and we just loved it. Yeah.
I could sometimes I still do it. I'm like, wow. It's just interesting because I can just you watch people. I mean, I know people sometimes don't like it, but I was like that when I was a kid. My mom would always be like, "Stop staring," and I'm like, "They're just interesting. Like I'm not staring to be rude. I think whatever they're doing, it's interesting, or maybe they're just an interesting person. I want to go talk to them, but of
Yeah.
course, little I
Yeah.
can't.
So going back to the astrology thing, I just finished a retreat in Mexico, a sacred success retreat, and one of the participants, her chart had 5 planets in Capricorn, which is very, very earth, but she
Okay.
was a spiritual healer. So she was really hiding that part of herself, that
Okay.
part of her that is organized and a really strong businesswoman. And, and I feel like this is part of the enlightened misfit, is that
Yeah.
there's this part of us that is our true self, like our spirituality, our empathy, like being an empath, astrology, whatever it is, but we try to hide it. And so I didn't call her out in a bad way, but I pointed it out to her, and it was almost like a permission slip, right? It was like this permission slip to lead with that, because she was wanting to lead, or trying to lead, with her spirituality. And it's like, no, no, you actually are a grounded, amazing entrepreneur. And it was like she was trying to hide that part of her and lead with the spirituality, because that's what she loved, right? The other stuff
Yeah.
was she just took it for granted because she was so good at it, like so good at running her business and making money and attracting what clients and everything, right? And so I think that's one of the really strong keys of knowing about your astrology, is that permission slip to be you. And I think that's part of the enlightened misfit. It's that part of us that we're trying to hide, that we're maybe really good at, that we're not hiding it anyway,
Right. Right.
but right, it's like this permission slip to actually lead with it, instead of thinking or trying to hide it, that shadow part of ourselves, or we
Yeah.
think of it as shadow. other people love it about us.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's literally, yes, that's literally why I decided to call it the Enlightened Misfits, because I noticed my incarnation cross, people that listen to me about human design all the time, they probably know what it is. But my actually incarnation cross is, hold on. Okay. It was raining here in Delaware when we were recording, and all of a sudden the sun came out. Well, I love it, but
She's shining.
so that's that is literally the so the incarnation cross is a big part of your what you do, like your purpose, your mission. And
Yeah.
mine is the right angle of masks. And I noticed throughout my whole life, like you basically just described, is we try to hide different parts of ourselves. Going
Yeah.
back into my like incarnation cross and my purpose, so people that are listening, if you don't know if people come to me all the time, I want to know my purpose. Well, I usually segue into that, but I also know that if you're not in your authority and the strategy, nothing else in human design or really astrology matters, because it's like you need to embody who you are first, and then you can kind of
Mhm.
evolve. I feel like that's just my perspective on it.
Yeah.
Um, and what I noticed was I'm really good at hiding me hiding, and I also noticed that, my clients are trying, or other people around me are also really good at hiding.
Yeah.
But I can see through their masks. So I definitely, to basically like evolve like everything that you just said, or like kind of wrap around, full circle what you said. That's why I named it the Enlightened Misfits, because I said, no, what is like a better name for people to realize that this is a safe space they can come to, share their story, talk about themselves. Because most people don't like to talk about themselves. I'm on podcasts all the time, and people are like, okay, so tell me about yourself. I'm like, I hate talking about myself, but that's normally, it's like, who am I? What do I like to do? And it's like, most of the time it's like, I love anything spiritual, anything witchy, and people are like, "Oh, okay, what's that? What's that mean?" you know. But
Ah,
people that when people that know, they know, like they get it. You don't have to explain that. So, yes, I do. That's literally the shadow part of, because I truly believe that there is so much wisdom in our shadows, and my whole life I hid in my shadows because I was embarrassed, scared, fearful of trying to show people who I truly were, because I wasn't going to be accepted and all that, all that stuff. So it's
yeah.
definitely a space. What I've noticed, like the guests, they said it's a space that they feel comfortable, they feel safe, and they can talk about. And there's a lot of things that people talk about that they never talked publicly about. And they're like,
Right.
well, I don't know why I just said that. And I'm like, well, it's because you feel safe. And once you feel safe, right, you're going to talk about things that are
Yeah.
motivating for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So,
interesting. When we first got on, I think, I don't know if you mentioned that I created a deck of oracle cards years ago.
oh,
And so when I first got on here, I drew us a card, and I drew
okay.
the cobra pose, which is unity and shadow.
I love that.
You're just talking about the shadow, and it's that part of us that we do. We try to hide. We try to, not lead with. And it's
Yeah.
usually, yeah, our true purpose, our zone of genius. And yeah, we're trying to hide it and not lead with it. But it, most times our friends, most people will see through it anyway. And I went through that as well when my kids were little, when my babies were little, and I was, you know, trying to fit in with the other moms in the community, and not lead with my spirituality. But I do remember I was at the gym one time, and my youngest, who is now 27, was like in the daycare at the gym, so he was
Yeah.
1 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was walking up to the elliptical, and she said, "Oh, there's our witchy friend, Candace." And I'm like, "What? Like, how do you know that about me?" And it was like, there's no hiding it, it comes out anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
No, people always, I think people always knew that, like, I would just say weird stuff. Like when I was with my friends, I would always base it around astrology. It's like, oh, the new moon. Oh, and it's like, they're like, oh, Lauren probably knows the answer to why we all feel this way or whatever. It's like Mercury retrograde or something. I was like, I don't normally play into that programming, but Sure. We can talk about it, or it's like,
Yeah.
don't talk about astrology, Lauren. Just try. I'm like, I'm telling you that it makes sense. There's always an answer to it. It's not just a coincidence, like whatever. I don't believe in any of that, but
Yeah.
I never have. So it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I was thinking of you when you called me. I was like, well, duh. Like people are
Yeah.
like, that's so weird. And I'm like, why would it be weird? All that stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely, that's one of the, I should say, missions behind my podcast, or why started that. I would love to know, and people that are watching this on YouTube, because people do watch this on YouTube, can you show them or talk about your Oracle cards? I'm going to definitely order some.
They're called Yogini's Guide Intuition, or Yogini's Guide to Intuition Oracle cards. And then I have a book as well, Yogini's Guide Intuition is a Choice. And so the book starts with, each chapter starts with the image, and then
Okay.
the divinatory part of what the yoga posture means, or the aspect of yoga, and then
Oh,
how to bring it into your everyday life. Because I don't just teach, I live this. Like, I live yoga, I live spirituality, I live with intuition and manifestation. And so I created the deck of cards. I had a yoga studio for 17 years,
okay.
and I was teaching yoga, and I would get intuitive hits as to what the yoga postures meant on a spiritual level. So I just started taking note. Like, I just started taking notes, taking note. And so then I started teaching about manifestation. So as I said, I had my background is yoga therapy, then I became a chakra therapy, and then I created a program called Manifestation Magic, and it's manifesting through the chakra system, using the chakra system. And so I was launching this for the first program, like the program, with just a
Okay.
few friends. And so what came out of it is I wanted to be more global. I wanted to keep working with the organization I was working with, and I wanted to go to India. And within 3 months, I had signed up for a global Save a Challenge, and I was raising $20,000 for victims of sex trafficking in India.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, and it just came across my desk. It was like, how did this happen? And, I'm like, I need to do this. And that was my first instinct, right? I need to do this. And then my next thing is like, who am I to be a fundraiser? And, how is this going to affect my business? How is this going to affect my family? How is this going to affect my life? And then I'm like, no, I need to do this. So I stepped in, I raised the money very quickly. 9 months, I raised 20K. And so then as a result, I was going to go to India. And so I had a studio, and I was getting ready to go to India 6 weeks out, and I got the intuitive hit to sell my studio. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I called the landlord, because the funny thing, and I'm using air quotes because, the universe is always working for us. But the funny thing is,
Right.
I'd rented the space for years, but for that year, I never got the contract. She never got the contract to me. I'd given her all the post-dated checks for the year, but she didn't have the contract. So I said to her, oh, so I phoned her up and I said, hey, I never did get the contract from you. So does that mean my rent goes month to month? And she said, yes, it does. And I said, and that time I wasn't going to sell it. I thought I'm just going to close it. And so I said, okay, I'm going to give you 6 months, 6 weeks notice that I'm letting go of the studio. And she said to me, she said, oh, and I told her why. She said, oh, I'll give you a free month's rent. And I get off the phone, and it felt like resistance, right? Like, oh, and sometimes we think of resistance as only a bad thing, but resistance can come in a good way. And so I
Right.
tapped in, I checked in with my body. And this is a trick that people can use if they're ever at a crossroads and trying to make a decision. So I said out loud, I'm going to keep the studio. And my body contracted, and my body said, no. I heard it really loud, no. And then I said, I'm going to let the studio go. And it was a yes. And it was a big opening. And so then as a result, I sold the studio instead. I reached out to people that would rent the studio from me, or teachers, and somebody else bought the studio from me. So 2 days before I left to go to India, I handed over my keys. And everybody thought, what are you doing? Like, you love teaching yoga. I had created this amazing community. I could teach workshops there. I saw clients there. Like, I had my own office and saw clients. Everybody thought I was crazy. And that's the thing. That's what happens, though, is our intuition comes through. It's our soul speaking to us. And it's like saying yes, it's moving through the discomfort. And so I said yes. I said yes, didn't know why, didn't know what was going to happen. Went to India for 6 weeks, came back, went through a really dark night of the soul. Like it felt horrible, like really dark. And there was so much fire coming off of me. Like, you know, my husband could feel it. My sister, she came to visit and she got a rash because I was like burning her with my fire energy. And yeah, she's like, look at this rash I have on my face because she came to visit and was only there the second day. I'm like, oh, sorry. But what it did is then eventually, like after a month or two, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to do my oracle cards. I'm going to dig them out. I'm going to start writing them. I'm going to start creating them. And then as I was creating them, I knew I had a book. And so then I went to Sedona and wrote my book. And then a year and a bit later, I got my book and my cards out. So, you know, it's just see, like it just, that just shows how you get guided and guided and guided by source.
Yes, yes. And that's literally kind of how I've done yoga too. And I'm, a certified yoga instructor. I've never owned a studio. It's something that I thought that maybe I could do what or wanted to do one day, but I was guided somewhere else. And when you talk about healing and using intuitive guidance, I do love that you have made this book and oracle cards, because I feel like a lot of people are starting to wake up now and they're like,
Mhm.
I don't know how to listen to my intuition. I don't know, I don't know what it feels like. And I usually, the simple thing that I teach is the body testing,
Yeah,
you ask your body, and if you sway forward or backwards, you
right.
can't question that. That's your body telling you yes or no,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I even still to this day, and that's kind of why I like Theta Reiki more, because when I used to do a lot of Reiki or Theta, I would always be like, or Theta Reiki, I'd always be like, well, how do I really know if, how do I really tell them if this is really working for them or if this is really what they should decide? So I started doing it to myself and I was like, oh, do this. And then I realized, oh, that's actually a technique you can do, but usually most of the time that's downloaded. Same thing with when I did the shamanic journey, I did know I needed to clear out, I was a shaman in a past life, probably multiple past lives, and I needed to clear out karma from when I abused my power back in those past lives. Obviously, it's affecting me in some level this lifetime. And I resisted that path because I knew how difficult it would be. And then
Mm,
now that I've done that path and I continue to kind of, move about the shamanic way, it's so much easier. It's the same thing.
mhm.
It's just a different technique that, you can do with, I'm sure you did with yoga or whatever, manifestation or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would do chakra balancings all the time.
Oh
I'm a
yeah, yeah,
therapist as well.
yeah,
And this is how this is why manifestations or manifesting gets stuck, right? Our
right.
manifestation, like, so we have the vision, we have the, we have a download from source energy, we have the vision of it. Maybe we start talking about it, but then, like, so it can get stuck anywhere, or it can go right down to the root chakra. And it's like, how much is this going to cost? How is this going to affect my family? Like, you could see that in my
Yeah,
decision making, right? And
yeah,
it's up to, oh, but this is my true purpose, right? And this is relationships, that this is part of my true purpose and what I'm here to do. So then it comes back up to the heart chakra, and then it can go down to the solar plexus. Yeah, but it's going to be scary, like putting yourself out there and being seen and in your community and raising the money and even going to India. And then all of a sudden you start talking about it. And it was I was speaking with one of my friends, and I said, I just don't want to be on my deathbed and thinking that I wished I had at least tried to raise the money for victims of sex trafficking in India. And it's like, when those words came out of my mouth, I'm like, oh no, you're doing it. It was just like, oh no, you're doing it. But you
yeah,
can see how it can get stuck in any one of the areas. And so the manifestation magic process, it takes you through each pillar into and clearing it out, because a lot of the women that I work with, or most of the women I work with, they come to me knowing that it's stuck somewhere. They feel like they're doing everything right. They're feeling like, or sometimes they feel like they've done everything and it's not working, or they feel like maybe they're doing it wrong. Maybe I'm not meditating enough, or maybe I'm not doing enough gratitude in my gratitude journal, or maybe I'm not visualizing correctly. And those are the people that I love to work with, because you're not doing it wrong. This is me to the listeners. You're not doing it wrong. You are manifesting all the time, but there's one area where it's getting stuck, and that's what needs to get cleared out. That's where it needs to get cleared out, so that you can be this free flowing into, manifesting it, dreaming it, visualizing it, and bringing it into your life instantly. Money likes speed. Manifestation loves speed. So it happens really, really quickly.
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny how once I know for me in my experience, I realized I was always manifesting. Like you said, you always are manifesting.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I think when it was like, my mom had asked me one day, why do you keep attracting all these abusive, toxic people? Well, that's
Hmm.
what I was manifesting. Obviously,
Yeah.
I was saying what I didn't want, but doing the opposite of what I wanted, right? And I
Yeah.
was telling the universe, well, this is what I'm going to accept. So here you go. This is this. And then I
Yeah.
realized one day, well, how about if I just stop doing that and actually do what I want to do? And then,
Hmm.
it shifted, and it shifted very quickly. I always say that I have a superpower of detaching, and that's the key. I always feel like when I manifest, or just manifest in general, you have to detach from what you want and let it come through. Because if you don't, you're then trying
Yeah.
to micromanage. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I need to do this. Oh, it's not this way. It's not that way. And it's just like, at that point, you missed it. It's totally gone. The moment it's totally gone, the whole
Yeah.
thing is totally gone. That was
Yeah.
my
I
hard.
yeah, I always say we try to micromanage spirit.
Yeah.
We're micromanaging source energy, or God, or whatever. It's
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever.
not
Yeah. Whatever you
micromanaging
want to call
God.
it. Yeah. And it's funny because that's human nature. Like, that's a human tendency that I always tell people when they're like, oh, I don't like my emotions. Oh, I feel like, and I'm like, well, you're human. If you don't have emotions or you don't feel emotions, then that's when you should worry, because you're not
Yeah.
so you try to figure out if your heart's still beating, you know.
Yeah.
But yes, I sometimes do that. Like, Lauren likes to do it Lauren way, and Spirit will tell me, no, you're gonna do it this way, and it's like, no, I think I have a better way. I think my way is better, and then it's like, fine, sure, and then that takes me 3 to 4, 6 months longer, and then I realize, okay, I think I'm gonna let go and surrender to what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think
That's why my
surrender.
book is called Intuition is a Choice, because sometimes we follow our intuition and sometimes we don't.
Right.
And it's okay when we don't, because there's lessons there too. Right. And I
Right.
don't believe that we're ever off our path, that we're just continually, we might take a bigger route, like we take the longer route sometimes. So we go around instead of going straight through. And it's like, damn, I did it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when people think they can go around, which they can go around, but you're going to go right through it again. Like, there's
Yeah.
going to be another experience where you have to go right through it. And it took me probably a couple years to learn that. I would
Or
go,
maybe the straight through is the direct route. Maybe that's
yeah.
the direct route, right? And this is the long way around. So, it's like, yeah, yeah,
I always, even to this day, I think I probably can't do the short way. I have to always do the long way, because I feel like all of those things that I learn along that path, I will never go back to that, because it's like, oh, I know I learned that multiple times. I'm not doing that again. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, I feel like that is kind of what keeps me in the straight and narrow. And two, it's just I have more wisdom that I know what's going to happen if I do that. It's like
Oh,
this choice
yeah. Oh,
or that.
yeah. I don't have to take
No,
a
no,
long
that.
way anymore either. It's like,
No,
no, let's
this
just
is taking too
let's
long.
take the direct line. Yeah. 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 And it's because it's really is about aligning your energy. It's aligning your energy with prosperity, with money, with what it is that you truly want, wealth, abundance, whatever it is that you truly want. It's just aligning your energy with that.
Right.
And so many of us live in a suffering state of being, right? So when we're in a suffering state, we can't be in a powerful state of being. We can only be in one or the other at all times. So, even for the listeners, asking yourself, am I in a suffering state? Do I feel, which just means you feel crappy, like you don't feel on your game, you don't feel good? Or are you in a powerful state where you know you're in flow and you feel good and you're happy and you're joyful and excited about life? And so, but when you're in a suffering state, and there's nothing wrong, like there's nothing wrong with being in either state of being.
Right.
It's just that when you're in the suffering state, you can't connect to source energy. You can't connect to your intuition, your creative energy. You can't connect to any of those things that are going to help you to manifest. And so, how do you bring yourself out of it and move yourself back into the suffering state? And I've done this workshop many times where I ask the participants, how much time do you spend a day in a suffering state of being? And I've had one person say to me 10 hours a day. And I'm like,
Wow.
that breaks my heart. Like it's like her entire day at work, going to work, coming home from work. It's like life is like, no, that just breaks my heart to hear that. Right. And so it's like, okay, how can you, if you have to stay in this job, how do you move, how do you do this work or do your job and move yourself into a more powerful state? And that's what my process helps you do as well, is really to how do we stay, not that we're always going to be in a powerful state. That's not human nature. Like we're not always in a powerful state,
Right.
but being aware of, okay, I'm in a suffering state now. So how do I shift myself back into that powerful state so I can manifest what I want? I can create the life I want. I can feel good. I can connect to source energy and my intuition. And yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you act the way that I was going to ask you a little bit about your process, but you must have got my intuitive thought. So thank you for sharing that. I was going to say thank you for speaking about that too, because I often feel like, especially there must have been a new wave of awakening because there's a lot of people that are like waking up right now. I think I was fully awake since I was born. Now, I shouldn't
Mhm.
say, sorry, that was a lie. Not fully awake, but I feel like I was awake when I was born.
Yeah.
And then it kind of got pushed down through all of my experiences and trauma and stuff. But then I feel like I fully awakened back up in 2020. No,
Okay.
2019, maybe 2018. I think it was that wave of maybe it was 2017. I don't know. It was something like that. It was around
Yeah.
that time period. And that's when I went through my divorce, had my daughter, all that stuff. So um that shift, I feel like, especially now with when I look back 20 years to what I was doing, and then that, with Pluto and Aquarius now,
Yeah.
I
Which
woke up.
just happened this week.
I know. Yeah. So I literally
So we're
woke
feeling
up.
it.
I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm living a completely different life. Like when they say, oh, a completely different timeline, I'm like, yeah, whatever. They always say that, like supermoon, whatever. I'm like, they always say that. But I'm like, I legit feel like I'm living like I wanted to burn my business down this week. I'm like, I want to start over. I'm not doing this anymore. I think I should go back to my 9 to 5, all this stuff. Same
Yeah.
thing with your kind of similar with your story when I left my successful 9 to 5, making 6 figures and making a lot of money and thinking, I pretended to be happy and, all this stuff. And didn't have debt, then had some more debt, all this stuff, like wasn't worried about money. I don't, I look at money differently. I've always looked at it. I was like, oh, okay, if I have it, I have it. If I don't, I don't. Obviously, my bills were always paid. I figured out I have the money line in human design. So it's easy for me to just create money, or create income.
Yeah.
And I told my mom I'm moving across the country. That was short lived because of my ex husband trying to control things, whatever. So we had to come back to Delaware. My mom's like, okay, so you're going to go back to work? And I'm like, nope. They offered my job back. I was a high risk OB ultrasound tech. So I loved doing what I was doing. I was just burnt out. Like I could
Mm.
not, I was like by 2 o'clock, I'm like, ugh, I feel like I'm going to die. Like I'm tired. Can I go take a nap on the stretcher? I was just burnt out, tired. And um, my mom's like, well, what are you going to do? I was like, I don't know. The universe is going to tell me because I don't know what I'm going to do. Like I had my savings and stuff, which I figured it out very quickly. But,
Yeah.
yeah, like I did, people probably still to this day are like, she's crazy, but they're watching my transformation, like, being a published author, now having my own business, going through all of them, all the certifications I felt like I needed to have to call myself what I do now, all this stuff. So it's like, it's crazy when you listen to your heart. It's not crazy. It's actually, it's interesting if you just listen to your heart. and you just follow
Mhm.
source and you just are open to not live in fear because, that's how they can, control us here is living in fear, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's my sign to me when people go, "What are you doing?" Like question me or think I'm crazy. That's my validation that, oh, I'm following my intuition. And
Oh, that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm following my intuition because people don't get what I'm doing. And so it's more validation for me now. And I believe our intuition is our soul speaking to us. Right. And so if our soul is speaking to us, it's our soul that wants us to get out there to shine our light bright and to really put ourselves out into the universe. It's our ego that wants us to play small. So it's
Right.
like, let the soul come through.
Yes, I love, love, love
Mm,
that. So
mm.
before we wrap up, and thank you so much for sharing all your expertise. I truly appreciate it, and I know the listeners do as well. Where can people find you? And do you have one last like golden nugget that you want to leave with the listeners?
Okay. Well, this was super fun. It went so fast. We
I
could
know,
talk
I
all
know. I
day.
looked at the time and I was like, oh my gosh, okay.
Yeah, so I have Align with Your Vision. It's a four-part video series and it's available on my website,
Okay.
CandaceMckim.com, CandaceMckim.com. And you just go onto that website and you can find it. It's right on the very top. And my words of wisdom is we need all of the spiritual leaders and the healers and the energy workers and the coaches out there to really step into their full expression of themselves, to show up as bright as possible and to make a difference in the world. That right now more than ever, we've moved into the era where it's a little bit it's more it is safe for you to shine and to show up and to do your work in the world. This is the first time in history in all of our lifetimes that it is actually safe for you today. I don't know about in the next year, but right now it's actually safe for you to do your soul work in the world. And so don't hold back. Go big. Go big.
I love that. And that I was gonna say I can second that too, because it is very safe, especially with the age of Aquarius. I think it's going to be uh it could be a little bit gray area sometimes, in the future, but I feel like it's gonna from now on gonna be like a new way of living.
I do too.
Holistically, I feel like,
I
especially
agree.
all the stuff that's going on in the United States. So it's like
Yeah.
I'm very excited. Being an
Yes.
Aquarius, I'm very excited. I'm like, finally, people are going to be like me, more like me.
They're gonna be waking up and they're gonna be needing support. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us on today's episode with Candace on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with somebody that you feel that gained knowledge from listening. Stay tuned for more captivating conversations in the future. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next time.